Have you ever built an e-learning course and get to the point where you're like, I got to do voiceover? I don't know about you all. I've dealt with that plenty of times. It's kind of my Achilles heel. It's something I know personally I don't want to deal with because I'm a person who doesn't like the sound of their own voice. And so if you're like me, if you're newer to instructional design, if it's something that is kind of a thorn in your side, you are in the right place today. I invited my dear friend Rachel Porter to join us today. And Rachel is a voiceover artist extraordinaire. So kind of the goal of today is to get your questions answered about voiceover, to really kind of dive in deep to this topic, because I think it can really, again, my opinion, I think it can make or break a learning experience. I really do. I think that if it's something that attention has been given to, it can really kind of elevate it. But then if it's really bad or robotic, I think it can also decline in engagement and value. So without further ado, I want Rachel to just go ahead, if you be kind of just introduce yourself to folks.
Yeah. Hey, guys. It's so good to meet all of you and see you today. Thanks for taking the time on this official holiday, day before the holiday. So yeah, I'm Rachel Porter, voice actor in Kansas City. Go Chiefs, Super Bowl champions. Let's see, I'm a mom of 3 kids, surviving COVID like everyone else and running my business and things like that. So I think Kara talked about talking about how I got into voiceover. And this question, I never quite know like how detailed to be and what to say and how to go in. So I'll give you guys just a general quick overview. But so in high school, my favorite class was radio and TV and broadcast. I love that. Fast forward to my freshman year in college, and I was taking a radio class that I really liked, and we had like a college radio station and was on the air. And then I had this professor that was kind of older and cantankerous, and he pulled me aside one day and he's like, hey, your voice is really annoying. I probably wouldn't use it for anything. And I'm 18 and I start bawling and I call my parents and I'm like, what is happening? And so long story short, I ended up switching schools, transferred to K-State, Kansas State University, switched my major even to public relations, so less of like a radio and TV focus. Got my degree in PR, worked for a firm for a little bit, ended up working, I grew up in Tennessee, so I ended up working for Dave Ramsey for a little bit, doing some financial counseling. Then I had babies, and then one of my best friends that I met my freshman year in college is a voice actor. And so it kept coming into the back of my mind of like, hey, should I do that? Can I do this? Would that be fun? Like, so I just started. She told me what mic to buy, how to kind of soundproof an area I had. And then you just, when you own your own business or doing anything, you just got to start and just take a risk and have some courage. And so it's been a great journey. It's a lot of hard work, but I love it and it's so fun. And I love the variety too of what comes to my inbox from a client or from an audition. So that's kind of my story. And yes, I've definitely thought of finding that professor and emailing him and being like, yeah, now I do this and I get paid for it. But, it's one of those good stories now looking back on it, overcoming like someone's opinion, because we all have people in our lives that have said like negative things to us. So yeah, that's a little bit about my story and how I got started.
So I kind of was a little bit when you said Chiefs, because I'm actually a Carolina Panthers fan, but we never win anything, but I'm happy when other teams do. But I also just had a little fangirl moment when you said you used to work for Dave Ramsey. Like Dave Ramsey is someone I follow and love the content that he pushes out. But I love that you mentioned that person said that to you about you're not going to go anywhere. And I think that's something that a lot of people, especially new to instructional design, you may feel like you don't belong, or you see all these people doing all these great things online and you might have FOMO. But I used to work for a jerk face too, who told me that I didn't have a future in training and I didn't know what was up either. So I used it as fuel, and I said, oh, you think you're going to be that way and I don't matter? I'll show you. And so I propelled that and used that as fuel. So I just think that's a great story just to share, that a lot of times you either deal with professional doubters or you deal with kind of doubters within yourself. And I still do. I think we all kind of have a little element of that. So This kind of like organically happened. Your career kind of took off. So another question, how do you explain what you do for a living? If somebody's like, hey, what's a VO person? How do you operationalize that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so I usually say like I'm a voice actor or voice talent, and that is like intriguing, to people. So I, sometimes they're like, well, what do you voice? Like, or what's the coolest thing you've ever voiced? And so I say like, well, have you heard Pandora or the radio? Or if you had to ever watch a training course and maybe you enjoyed it or maybe you were bored to tears, like that's the type of person who's voice. Like, and it's interesting to hear, like people don't necessarily start thinking about voice until you start talking about that. And you're like, oh yeah, voice is used in so many things. So that's kind of my small like pitch. And then people usually have like fun questions of like, what's the most fun or unusual, or, so you have a home studio, tell me about that. So yeah, it's fun to talk about.
Yeah, let's dive into that a little bit. So it does sound like a big part of your business is e-learning. Can you kind of talk through maybe how you get to that point? So when you work with various companies, typically is there an RFP that goes out? Do you connect with instructional designers? How do you kind of get the momentum going on that side?
Yeah, what I've learned is every company is so different. Some have a very formal or more corporate process. Some are more casual and laid back. But, we were talking, Kara, before we started recording, of just even about the relationship that matters to me. It's old fashioned, but like I genuinely care about people and building a relationship. So, not just like, hey, hire me, but like, hey, tell me more about what you do. I actually care. Let me know if I can be of help in this area. So every client looks different, but I would say a big piece of what I do is just building relationships and getting to work with those repeat clients. And then it's so nice when you develop a rapport when someone will just be like, hey, I'm sending this to you. Can you do it? And you've already gone through all the technical stuff and all the details, and you work well together and stuff like that. So that's a fun thing with e-learning too, is being able to do stuff on repeat for people and having those long-term relationships.
All right, devil's advocate time. Okay. What do you say to people who say, I don't need a voiceover artist in my e-learning?
Oh man, please consider it. I'm not gonna convince everyone, but oh, thanks, Jacqueline, for loving my postcards. It's really a fun part of my business. So yes, man, it really, if you sit back and look at the larger picture, I promise you it will save you more than it costs you. I really, really do. And we can sit down and crunch numbers. I'm happy to do that. But and it's so hard sometimes because sometimes it isn't quantifiable. But, if someone asks their employee to sit down and record something and they do that, that's time taken away from their day-to-day job and what they're regularly doing. A lot of times they're not professional, with all due respect, as a voice actor. And so they have to go back and edit or heavily edit something. You always want to have the most high quality audio from the get-go to work with versus having something you have to heavily edit or go back and even re-record the whole thing because you forgot the AC was running in the background, or maybe whatever the situation may be. So to answer that question, I would definitely say in the long term, it's going to save you more than it costs you financially.
Yeah, I love that. And you also kind of piped another question in my head, because there are probably people here or will be watching the recording thinking, I'd love to work with a voiceover artist, but I don't know what I should consider. Should I have a script written? What are some deliverables I expect from the voiceover artist versus what I need to do as an instructional designer? And again, I know every company is different, but do you have any just suggestions of kind of things that you would expect a voiceover talent to do versus what an instructional designer should do for that?
Sure. I would say you make me think of with an instructional designer, and maybe this is super simplistic, but listen to their demos, listen to work they've done. If you're not in love with their voice, go to someone else, but listen to their work before you shoot them an email. I like to, as a voice actor, kind of outline everything on a Word document when someone books with me. So I kind of created this document. It's literally called so you booked me, now what? And just to be super clear from the get-go, hey, here's how invoicing works. Here's how delivery works. Here's my setup. here's what I promised to get you. Even if someone asks for a quote, I say in my deliverables, like, hey, you're going to get a final file. Here's what that means. Breaths are going to be edited out. There won't be any mouth noises. It's going to sound like this. I'll send it to you in this format. So I think on my end, being super clear on what I provide for that final file is super helpful to them. So.
Great. I think that is good. I see a couple questions come in here. I'm going to start with Anu's question, even though I see two other great questions too. So Anu's asking, when you create a course, what's your kind of thoughts? And I'll answer this from an ID perspective, but I'd love to hear your thoughts too. Is it okay to use a voiceover in some of the modules and maybe not so much in the others? Or should you have a consistent amount of voiceover in all the modules that you use? What do you think?
That is a great question. You know, I think, I guess a question I have back, it would be like, what else are you thinking? You know, like, are you just not having voiceover at all? Are you doing it yourself? Is it for budgetary reasons? Is that why? You know, if it is a budget constraint and you can only hire X amount of voice talent, then sure, do it for the portion you can and figure out the rest. And as you grow as a business, like, let's figure out how to incorporate that voice talent. So, you know, I'm obviously biased. I feel like it's super engaging when you have a professional voice there. You know, that's another piece we haven't talked about, but I've seen gone around on LinkedIn and other platforms of like, it is acting, you know, so there's a piece that we bring as voice actors that is someone that's going to narrate the course that's just working for X, Y, and Z company won't have that experience or background. So yeah, I would say if you have the ability to have voice throughout, I think that would be very beneficial. What do you think on your end as an instructional designer?
So I think the big question, and it looks like Anu did follow up and say it's a budget thing, but for me, I would say, who's your audience and where are they consuming it at? So a great example, where I currently work, it's a very loud environment. People are on their feet, they're moving around, there's a lot of machines going on. So even if the voiceover is like amazing, I have to realize when I'm designing something that they're probably not going to be able to always hear it because it's a safety hazard for them to have a headset on or listen to audio on the floor. So thinking about that, I think, is also very important. But if you have it coupled with subtitles, or you have it coupled to where if for some reason they can't necessarily hear it or enjoy it, I think it's a good thing. But also, they may be thinking, if they're so used to it, it could be a consistency thing. So they hear Rachel's amazing voice all throughout that first module. The second module, they're not hearing it. They might think, is this a tech issue? Am I messing something up? Is there something not right with it? So I think as consistent as you can be in what I'm calling a learning campaign, I think that's really critical. But I'd love to hear other thoughts also in the chat. And I want to catch Stephen's question before it scrolls away. He's asking you, Rachel, about the voiceover. Do you typically, if you work with clients, is there a royalty? So like, let's say that I have a course that I'm monetizing and I use your voice. Do you typically ask for a royalty of that, or how does that work?
I don't. I have never done that. Voice actors might do that if it's like an audiobook. Sometimes they'll pay in royalties, which sometimes, unless it's like a really good seller, isn't a great scenario for us. But I just more charge, you know, there's lots of ways to do it. You can do per word or per finished minute or per course. You know, and I would say too, to speak to what we were saying earlier, if you're interested in a certain voice actor or hiring that out, just send them an email and ask them. You know, a lot of times as voice actors, we're flexible. We're happy to talk it through and figure it out. We're happy to even send a custom like snippet of a 20 to 30 second sample of what it could sound like in your course. And don't be afraid to ask very specifically, like, hey, we want this super formal, or we want this more conversational. I mean, chances are if I send you a sample and you're like, well, that's good, but, you know, we want it a little less formal. Like, as an actor, they can do that, you know, whoever you're working with. So ask them to tweak that, and they can usually do that unless you're looking for a very different type of voice, like a deep male voice. Obviously, I can't do that. But, you know, like most voice actors are going to be flexible within what they can do.
Yeah, that's a great point, and a great question, Stephen. Something I know that I hadn't really thought of. I have another friend who does voiceover, Mike Lenz, and I know he does a lot of audiobooks, and he does audiobooks, and he does like phone trees of thank you for calling this company, dial 1 for this and dial 2 for this. So I do think it's really neat that there's kind of that variety. You made me also think of a sort of related question. And again, depending on kind of where you are in your journey and what your learning strategy is, but I know that it's kind of been a hot topic for a while, but more use of companies are looking to use maybe podcasting more as like a learning experience. So if somebody is like interested in maybe building that, Rachel, from your perspective, from like a, voiceover perspective, what are maybe some tech considerations or things that people might want to ask themselves in their organization if they're looking to maybe start like a corporate podcast or something?
Yeah, I actually just did a podcast intro, outro for a great e-learning client. And, something to consider is in that scenario, a lot of times it's not just your voice. There's like a music bed that you're putting behind it. So it has an audio editing piece that sometimes designers might not be aware of. So that's something to consider with your budget as well, as it's more people's time and effort to lay that audio and finding, the right music you want set behind it. That's something to think about. Do you want the music to die down? Do you want it to stay full blast while someone's talking? Do you just want audio? Do you not want music behind it? If you're in doing a podcast for the long haul, it can be super beneficial to hire someone to do that intro outro for you, and it lends more professional there. So that's something to think about as well.
I love that tip because I have all these great ideas for my podcast, but I'll put myself on blast. Joe Suarez is the real brains and grit behind our podcast because I have all these great ideas and I'll record something, but Joe's the one that like does all the stuff in the background, and it's a lot of work. I mean, it is a lot of work to do a podcast consistently. So if you're aggravated, there's not a lot of episodes of mine. I totally take full responsibility of that. SJ has a great question here that I think several people might be interested in. So she says that she took voiceover lessons last year and recorded some commercial and narration demos, and was wondering if there's any specific trainings or techniques or skills that you use, Rachel, to really fulfill those e-learning projects that you work on.
Yeah, well, in general, keep taking classes. Like I've been in improv for a year and that's huge. I work with a voiceover coach on a regular basis. So even if that's something you can do, if you're required to narrate a course, and I know it will make you uncomfortable, and improv made me uncomfortable at first, but it grows you so much. It's so good for you. So that, or an acting class, or working with a coach. Yeah, I mean, I kind of have a methodology where when I get a script in hand, I read through it and I first ask myself, like, what is this about? And just a general, like, I got one yesterday and I'm like, man, this is about community. This is about health. So I write that at the top. And then I go through sentence by sentence, which you wouldn't do this with an e-learning course that's like 20 pages, but you go through at the start to say like, okay, like what's this first sentence about? What's this paragraph about? Where are we transitioning? I actually have a whole course I've taught on this called like It's Acting, and how to bring acting to that. And so then you have to decide like, okay, am I myself in this scenario? Do I as a person actually care about this topic? If not, pass, then pick someone else. Like, okay, who else in your world would care about this? And then you kind of become that character. There's actually a really great coach and actor. His name is Anthony Abeson. And you remind me, actually, I wrote down one of his quotes to share in regards to acting. There's a couple ones, but the more acute your perception of humanity, the more acutely you'll perceive the humanity of your characters. The culture wants you to be unobservant, passive, sedated, and distracted. Don't fall for it. Your calling requires it of you. You must be hip to the idea of your material and what your character stands for in relation to that idea. But you'll be blind, deaf, and dumb to ideas if you allow yourself to be manipulated downwards from the realm of ideas to the worlds of objects and people as things. I just love what he says about acting and bringing your best. I mean, we've all seen, even in TV, like we have our shows that we love, and we love it because it's really good acting. We also love it for other reasons, but we also have those shows that we've turned off before because we're like, man, I'm not connected to this. I don't believe what they're saying. So I think when you get a script, trying to figure out what it's about, who are you? Do you care about this? If not, who are you going to be and what character are you bringing to the piece?
I love that. And I love that you mentioned improv specifically. I attended Joe Cook. She had a virtual Zoom birthday party last week, and she actually hired someone and we did improv for an hour. And I felt extremely uncomfortable. I was very anxious about it. When it was my turn to talk, I was just like a nervous wreck. And so I do agree that things like that kind of get you kind of out of your comfort zone and can really grow you. But from an instructional design perspective, Rachel, you actually just brought an idea to my mind. When I'm writing like a script, like let's say I'm doing a storyboard for a learning experience and I'm kind of mapping out what my visual is going to be, but then also the voiceover. One thing that I've never really thought about putting in a script is the emotion behind it or the inspiration behind it. Do you see with your clients that they script that out, or would that be a valuable thing for instructional designers to put with it, like, you know, angry voice, boom, 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 or sad voice, boom, boom, something like that kind of help voiceover folks?
I think that would be hugely helpful. And I see that a lot in my commercial reads. When we have an audition, there's what we call the specs in it. So they say, we're wanting it to be, you know, I don't know, like a casual 20-something that's, you know, carefree, or we're wanting someone that's, you know, super upset because X, Y, and Z happened. So I do think if there could be some specs given, then that would be hugely helpful to know, you know, and even in the acting books and classes I've taken, there's differing opinions out there, but if you can't like regurgitate an emotion, like, okay, you want an angry voice, so let me just give you my angry voice, but thinking of the emotion behind it, the why is huge. Like, why are you telling this story? Why does it matter? I think if instructional designers can give that's going to be huge. And something you bring up an idea like that I like to do with new clients, voiceover is so nuanced, and even your casual might be different to you than it is to me. And so when someone books with me anew, I like to send them like a 30-second sample and say, hey, is this what you were thinking? Because you don't want to record the whole entire thing, edit the whole entire thing, and then be like, oh, well, actually, I thought a little bit about this. And you're like, actually, I just did all that. So I think it's good to get on the same page there and just to kind of send off a sample and see. Yeah.
No, I love that. Like a little mini calibration activity to make sure that the expectations are met on both sides. Really great tip. And I think that's also a really great tip for you instructional designers if you're getting sign-offs on storyboards and learning experiences from stakeholders. Instead of building the whole thing, make sure it's approved first. So pro tip. Might have fallen in that trap a couple times.
Yeah.
Another great question here about when you're building out a personal portfolio, do you recommend sharing the pure audio preview of the voice, or do you share snippets of your client's work? So maybe I believe this person might be interested in following in your footsteps as a VO artist, Rachel. So as you're building out your personal portfolio, how do you share some of your audio previews?
I have my website, you know, rachelportervo.com. So I have samples up there, you know, a lot of stuff I can't share because of the, you know, proprietary or, you know, it's obviously internal. So, but if there's a client that wants to hear a specific genre, I do have an e-learning demo that I'll shoot out to people. But if they want to hear a specific, like, hey, we're in the food industry, have you done anything for that? Or we're in medical narration, have you done anything for that? And so I get my client's permission, and then I might share that directly with them. But yeah, I think just having a variety of samples, you know, on my website of the different styles and things like that I can do. Yeah, and just being as clear up front as you can be. You know, I'm thinking like I did narration last year, some narration for Taco Bell, and for e-learning, and they're like, we want you to be so excited. And I was like, all right. So I create this scenario and who I am in that, and I send them a sample, and I think I am so excited. And then she gets it back and she's like, that's good. We need even more excited. And I was like, dang, okay, let's do this. Let's roll that burrito. So like, again, it's just super helpful up front, you know, on both sides being clear. And sometimes like instructional designers, they might not know what they want. You know, they might be learning, they might be newer. So both of you guys like being flexible as well is super huge. But I think clarity, and that's why I like that document. I know not all voice actors do that, but especially I've learned in the e-learning world, you know, it's great to get on the same page and figure all that out.
Yeah, and again, I think that's also a great tip for people that are looking to hop into freelance instructional design work too. I mean, just to have a document to kind of go through with that. So looks like we may have already answered this, but I'll just ask it anyway, Shamik. So when you're recording an e-learning voiceover script created by an instructional designer, do you have any additional things that you'd like them to add into the script, or are there things that maybe you push back on the instructional designer to ask for more clarity of? Like, do you have just a couple examples of maybe things that you've done that with?
You know, when I get a script, I make sure, and part of my document says like, hey, make sure all people have signed off on this, like legal and HR. So I don't usually give feedback on that script. I had one client recently say, hey, we do want this to sound more conversational. So if you feel like putting a word in here or there to make it more casual, do that. But usually with my e-learning stuff, it's pretty like, we want it exactly read how it is. So I don't usually offer feedback, if I'm understanding how you're asking that correctly, on the actual script.
Okay. Got another question that I just added to the Q&A, and again, I want to get to it before I forget it because I'm bad about that. This is a big one. I mean, especially I think for females, I think a lot of times this can happen a lot, but what tips do you have to make your voice a little bit more clear and less kind of nasally or pitchy?
Okay, a couple thoughts there. You know, just practicing with your voice before you get into record. So whether that's like, you know, there's even books that you can check out at the library or buy as far as like practicing, or even those like, I'm a mom, so those like rhyming, all those rhyming like nursery rhymes that you could say, like just get your mouth moving. It's going to be huge. Hydrating is going to be huge. But also I'll say to that, Rashida, like your voice is your voice, like never be ashamed of it. You know, like it makes me sad when people are like, my voice is so awful. Like, no, everyone has a voice for something, you know, like, so your voice might be higher pitched. That's okay. It's going to lend itself to a certain client. You know, but I would say as far as like consistency and enunciations and just getting in there and warming up your voice and practicing a little bit beforehand is going to be helpful, and staying hydrated as well.
Yeah, great tips. And especially I resonate with the your voice is your voice. I know when I moved, I grew up in the South, and I really worked hard to get rid of my Southern accent, because when I talk, people are like, oh, you're not from here. And then now it's like there's certain words I still have it on, but when I go home and I listen to people talk, I'm like, oh my gosh. But, you know, I wish I wouldn't have focused so much on that, because now it's like I go home and they're like, you're not from here. And then I'm here. It's like, you're not from me. So it's kind of like a weird place to be in. But I love that you have that. All right, another question. Again, thank you all so much for putting these questions in. These are fantastic. So there's a follow-up from Shamik about when you receive a voiceover script from e-learning, does it help you as the artist to also see kind of a visual of what the instructional designer is kind of thinking with that learning?
Oh, yeah. If you have that, totally send that along. You know, I also do a lot of like animated explainer videos. So visually for me to see like my character and who I'm being or what's going to be on the screen. Absolutely. I would say almost you couldn't share too much information with your voice actor and who's doing that.
Okay, great. All right. Okay, this is a big one, and this is one I know a lot of people love to hear, but they're asking a little bit about the lovely tutorials that you see on Pinterest, or like seeing somebody's setup of a studio. So can you kind of talk through maybe the iterations that you've had of like your booth, or like some of your go-to products for your booth?
Yeah, I can definitely, and I will give the caveat if there are a million things out there, and I'll tell you this, but if you were interviewing another voice actor, they'd tell you something else. So there's a lot of options, and it can be overwhelming. So sometimes it does help to say, hey, you, like, what do you use? So soundproofing is huge, you know, having a space that you, like I converted a hall closet, and so having, you can buy soundproofing on Amazon, like the foam that I'm talking about, or soundproofing blankets. Even in my closet downstairs, I've left my kids' coats because like it feels maybe a little counterintuitive at times, but stuff helps. absorb that sound. So that's going to help. Getting a good microphone. And if you're just starting, like a USB mic, something that plugs into the computer is fine. If you're doing it all the time, I would do something a little more high end. At the time, which you can't do this now during COVID, when I was upgrading my mic, I went to our local guitar center and tried out different mics because my voice is different than your voice. So it's going to pick up, you know, mine might be higher pitch and yours is lower pitch. So it's going to pick that up differently. So I would test things out or buy something and test it out for a while. But yeah, like that's kind of my general setup. Keep it simple, get a good mic, do some soundproofing, check the audio quality. Yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up to that? What is your favorite program to edit audio in?
I love Twisted Wave. I'm on a Mac, so it's only for Mac. So yeah, it's specifically written for voice actors to record audio. So it's simple. There is a free one out there called Audacity that I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with. There's also other ones out there, but it's just kind of what I've gotten used to and really like, so.
Cool. I've never heard that one before. Yeah, and Cheyenne's asking, did you say Twisted Wave or Twisted Wave?
Wave, W-A-V-E.
Okay, thanks. That's great. Yeah. All right, another question is, authoring tools are now coming up with speech-to-text options. Yes, they are. And a lot of times it is very robotic, even though I know that they're trying to make it a little bit better. Yeah. So the question is about, you know, convincing clients for the need for professional VO, because they want the courses at kind of that reasonable cost and are ready to compromise on the quality. So what are some of kind of the selling points that us as instructional designers can really share with our stakeholders to really go into getting someone like you to come in and really kind of elevate our learning experience?
Sure. I mean, if you can even get a sample from a voice actor, you know, and share that next to the voice to text option. I mean, I know I read that quote by Anthony Abeson on like acting and just humanity. But that's going to be huge, I think, is, you know, obviously like a voice actor is going to bring the emotion, the why behind it. So I think you can try to convince them all day with, you know, this paragraph or even numbers about like the cost benefit. Get real like into economics, but even just showing them like a sample side by side, you know, sometimes it is an uphill battle, but I think once people have buy-in, they're completely sold. You know, if you ask anyone that has used a good voice actor and had a good experience there, you know, and if you need several, I had this thought earlier, like more than one voice actor for a course, like also get a referral from other voice actors. You know, they have people they know and love, just like in any business, there's people that do a great job and people that might not do as great of a job. So get a referral. I mean, I love that anyway, just as a person is finding a personal referral there as well.
Agreed. Great tip. Great tip, because the professionals will know the other professionals.
Yeah.
Because I feel like, especially with instructional design, gosh, especially this year, I just feel like there's been so many of these experts come out of the woodwork. I'm like, who are you and where have you been, right?
Yeah.
So I love the fact that you're telling people to kind of get that referral. So if you have any last minute questions for Rachel, please put them in the Q&A. But a question I like to ask people, and I wouldn't ask if I wasn't willing to tell this on myself, but you got a story about your biggest kind of goofy McGoof of when you did a project and it just went completely wrong, and maybe something you learned from it?
Oh my gosh. Completely wrong. Something you learned from it. Okay. I would say early on, I had a client and they weren't like in the United States. They were over in Europe somewhere, and we were doing like an English translation textbook. And I recorded the whole thing and sent it to them. And they said like, well, this is good, but we need you to change all the these to thes. You know, like sometimes there's like, you know, whatever sentence you're saying, like the mushroom was behind the cloud, or, you know, the mushroom, you know, so like there's just things up front that it's like, okay, now from now on, I'm going to always ask, because they said, go back and change that. And I think sometimes if people aren't familiar with audio and recording and editing, they think, well, that's just an easy fix. Just go in there and say you know, but it's not that simple. You kind of got to re-record the whole sentence if you want it quality and things like that. So being super clear up front, I think I learned that. And just even, it's just certain words you kind of learn, like these are hot buttons, or like you want to ask how you want that pronounced, and asking that up front instead of on the back end.
All right. Last question before I have you share where people can find you. Do you have a word or phrase that just gives you grief that you struggle with? Mine is the word for the first meal of the day. I cannot say that word to save my life. I will try so you all can laugh at me. Breakfast. I cannot say that word, and my uncle still gives me a hard time about. Do you have a word or phrase that's just like you see it in a script and you're like, oh my Lanta, how am I going to say it?
There's a word that I can't think of right now that is tricky. Man, I'm gonna have to text you later. I would say one that colloquially, like, because I also grew up in the South, like important. It kind of sounds like important sometimes instead of important. So that's one, but there's also another one. I can't think of it right now, but yeah, it is interesting how you pronounce things. Like, there was like a bank recording I was doing recently here in town, and I think I said, your financial peace of mind is our priority. And for some reason, maybe it's a Southern thing too, I tend to say our priority instead of our. Like that feels very unnatural to me, like power without the P. Our, your financial peace of mind is our priority. So that was something I had to like wrap my mind around. So it is interesting when you start doing this stuff, you're like, oh yeah, I say this kind of this way, and we got to flip it this way.
I love that people are sharing theirs in the chat too. So
Yes.
Jacks are elephant and anonymous, and karaoke is another one. So yeah, itinerary, process for our friends in Canada. Couple other questions that popped in, so like a little lightning round here. So what's your thoughts on the future? Do you think that text-to-speech might get rid of VO people?
No, I mean, again, we're human. We need humans. We need that interaction and that relatability. I think that's always going to be there. At least I hope it is for lots of reasons. But yeah, I don't think it's going to take over anything.
Yeah, I hope not. I mean, I'm like you. I like there's like a human element to it. Noel is asking if you have a VO template for IDs. That might be something you might want to take offline, maybe. What do you mean by template, Noel? If you could just share maybe in the chat what you're looking for, maybe like some considerations or tips. But Kevin has a question about some examples of voice exercises. You said that you work with a coach. Can you share maybe a little bit more about that? Maybe some of the exercises you might be doing?
Sure. I wonder, Kevin, if you mean like exercises, like exercising your mouth, or like when I'm working with the coach, how to get into my character. I would be curious there. But as far as exercises with your mouth, if you want to email me later, there's a book that I've used in the past. I can't think of the name of it right now, but as far as mouth exercises and warming that up. Okay, pronunciation and sound. Yeah, so that's what I would do is finding a book, or like if you have kids, or if you don't have kids, find a nursery rhyme book. And those things like Peter Piper picked a pet, like doing things like that. It feels very weird, like if you're not used to it, but it's really good. Like, or even I think of The Sound of Music. I mean, I love Julie Andrews, but like just even like doe, a deer, a female deer, just saying things like over and over again like that. That's going to be helpful. So yes, but please, I'll put my email in the chat, but you guys can email me and I can give you that specific book if you would.
All right. Looks like we got clarification, and then we'll let Shamik have the last question. So do you have a preference on when you receive a script, what you would like an ID to do to kind of set you up for success on that script?
That is a great question. So, to have it readable, a Microsoft Word document is totally fine, but not to have size 6 or 8 font, like make it a little bit bigger. Even if, you need it split up by line or by module, making note of that and having that structured in a way that's super clear would be helpful. Also, we didn't really talk about this much, but pickups. If there's changes to the script afterward, if there's additions that you make, if there's mistakes that the voice actor made, because we are humans sometimes, highlighting those within the script is super helpful. I ask clients to do that, because if you just send me the one sentence that needs recorded out of context, text, it's, not going to be as helpful to me as if you send it within the whole paragraph and highlight maybe what you need. So that's also super helpful to us as voice actors. Yeah.
Great tips. All right, finally, the mic drop here from Shamik. So if you receive a really bad script, which I'm sure you have, do you ever feel tempted to make changes? So what's that conversation like?
Yes, tempted, but nope, you read it as it is. If I've been working with a client for a long time and something comes through and I'm like, hey, did you mean to add the here because it's missing like a joining word? I'll ask that, but a lot of times, it is like, hey, this is the final script, and if you want it read this way, I'll read it. But yes, if I can tell that something's blatantly like, is that the correct word? I'll try and shoot them a quick email and say, hey, is that what you wanted here? But I also don't want to come off as like I'm questioning them and what their decisions. So yes, but definitely I have been tempted.
No worries. Love it. All right. Where can people find you and connect with you?
Yeah, so my website is rachelportervo.com. My Instagram is @loveisrising. And then I'm also on LinkedIn, just Rachel Porter. I shot my email down below if you guys do have any further questions or want a recommendation as far as specifics with anything. I'm happy to help and answer anything. So thanks for having me today.
Oh, thank you. I think this is a critical conversation we should be having in learning and development. I do, again, think that audio can make or kill a learning experience. So anytime you have great professionals like Rachel and other voiceover artists in your corner that you can lean on for advice and hopefully bring them in for a couple of different projects, that just elevates, that personal touch of the project, but also adds to the credibility of the potential project. So
can I share one more thing?
Sure.
Just to think on the idea that sometimes, and I'm not sure why, because I'm not an instructional designer, but voiceover can sometimes feel like an afterthought. But I would love to see it come along and you choose someone like earlier in the process. So sometimes there's like, oh my gosh, I need this, and I actually needed it yesterday, but can you get it to me today? But like even just in the quality of the voice actor that you're choosing, if you don't already have relationships with people, taking the time to build those and maybe putting those earlier, because again, I'm biased, but like having a good voice in a course is going to change that for you. So don't let it be an afterthought or something you add on at the very end, like incorporate it earlier on.
Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Well, again, thank you so much, Rachel. Thank you all for joining us today. I know that in the States it's an observed holiday, but for me, I love it because I don't have anything to do through the main workday today. But thanks so much. I'll try to do better about scheduling these things. They typically come very kind of last minute, and that's on me and just kind of how my brain and chaos works. But Devlin Peck is in the house in the chat, and I know he's doing a great job of scheduling stuff out. So if you want to catch some of his XAPI stuff, definitely recommend following him on Crowdcast and getting on those sessions too. And I'm also up for suggestions. So if there's something you want to see tackled, talked about, please send me a message too. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And with that, have a nice weekend. Stay safe. Don't blow off an appendage, and have a good long weekend. Thank you all.